All right. I believe we had gotten to here. Well, that's a thing that just happened just now. Well, I just think it's funny because I made a game of this last year where I would just say "Let It Go" to see how often, how quickly people would sing that song. I never was able to say it more than once before singing happened. So, I just thought that was humorous. Anyways, we need tourism. Where were we? Agriculture. Okay, I think that was the one. Yeah, we had. So we were here. Oh, no good. We are way behind. Okay, that's all right. We'll move fast. So here's the deal. Don't write every single word down. We don't have time for that. You have time for this. Okay? If you want more, you can go back. You guys already know what push and pull factors are, so that whole sentence is irrelevant. Don't write it even down. The next one goes into latifundias and campesinos. You'll need both of those, so write those words down. This one and this one. Okay? I'll tell you what they are. Yes. Down in this little sentence, all you really need is minifundia. Okay? Can you see okay to write?
Yeah.
Okay. So, everyone has written down latifundia, campesino, minifundia, yes? Okay, do that. Do that first. The rest of it is extraneous nonsense you don't need.
What does it mean, though?
What?
Why am I in town?
Because I'm going to explain it to you here in a second. It's all good. I'm just reorganizing for you. It's all good. Don't worry. I won't let you behind, though. I got your back. All right, you ready? Let's do this thing. Latifundia. Latifundias are corporate farms. They're big. Think plantations. They are worked by campesinos, who are basically farmers for a paycheck. Okay? Now, there's a slight reason that they have an advantage. Latifundias are so big that they can be run more efficiently than smaller family-owned farms are. Think about it. A corporation can afford all the best machinery, all the best seed, all the best everything, and make things as efficiently as possible. Your family farmer can't do that. They are basically trying to scrape by and keep their farm. So what happens is the latifundias keep getting bigger as basically they put everyone else out of business, and they buy those farms from people who are basically kicked off, and they move to cities. Campesinos are those farmers who have been maintained as a wage farmer. With me so far? Okay. A minifundia is a response to this. Basically, a bunch of little farmers got together and said, let's cut down all the fences between our farms, and basically, I'll help you farm your farm, you'll help me farm my farm, we'll kind of work together as a team. So in essence, they operate like a latifundia, but they're still technically privately owned. So this way, everybody gets to keep their farm and also increase production. Does that make sense? Say no if it doesn't. Okay, that's all you need to know from this whole section. So, latifundias are what?
Large corporate-owned farms.
Minifundias are what?
Automated
Who are campesinos? And perfect. Moving on. This is a campesino working one of these farms. And basically, they get to stay in agriculture, but they tend to be paid very, very low wages. That's why things are so cheap. There's been a big movement, though, in the past 10 or 15 years called fair trade, basically trying to buy things for a higher price, but they ensure that that profit doesn't just go to the corporation, it also goes to pay workers a higher wage. There's a few reasons for that we'll get into here in a little bit. If you look at this map, really more of a satellite image, you'll see the two farms next to each other. These are individual-owned farms right in here. These little patchwork things are all small farms, all kind of doing their own thing. They're not as efficient as, say, this latifundia, this giant farm that's able to have fields bigger than some regular farms. Yes, go ahead. So this thing is something, you can catch all this on YouTube, I'm recording. So that will, again, be an efficiency thing. Now, what happens to these farmers when they're kicked off their land? Frequently, they move to cities. This causes urbanization to occur. Basically, they're looking for work. A lot of times, those are in factories like Maquiadoras, but also the number one trade in a lot of islands in the Caribbean, as well as throughout the coast of South America, is tourism. Tourism provides a lot of money to these countries. I mean, if you think about it, tourists come and spend a ton of cash. They have to buy all their meals, they have to rent places to stay, they buy a lot of tchotchkes and souvenirs. So, I mean, a lot of money can be introduced into a country this way. Not to mention, a lot of workers, sailors and that sort of thing, come from the country that they're sailing around in. My parents actually recently got back from a 4-week cruise, 5-week cruise around the tip of South America. And they told me that they hung out a lot with a German priest. For whatever reason, he was down, I guess his parish was in Brazil. And as a going away gift, they basically said, hey, thanks, we're going to pay for you to have a cruise. So he was there basically by himself. And apparently they don't get very many priests on board cruise ships. And so masses really, I mean, they have them, but they're very, very small, and it's not a priest or something to that effect. I'm not sure about how that works exactly on a cruise ship. But apparently whenever they get a priest, they can you please do mass, please, please, please. And apparently the entire crew of the ship showed up for it, because they're all Catholic. Roman Catholicism is the number one practice faith in Latin America. And so that just kind of shows to you how involved it is with the tourism trade. However, there are some problems with tourism as well. For instance, to have tourism in your country, you must have certain bits of infrastructure in place. Infrastructure is a catch-all word that means basically any industry, anything we need for industry or an economy. So power plants are considered part of infrastructure, so are sewer systems. But in the case of needing tourism to come into your country, you need airports, you need hotels, you need big ports, to be able to take in cruise ships, that sort of thing. To build these, a lot of countries had to invest capital they didn't have. So that meant borrowing money, and that put them into debt. And these countries were never able to actually pay that back. So a lot of countries in Latin America, especially in the Caribbean, are hugely in debt. Add to this the fact that the money made for these tourist expeditions, this tourism industry, is frequently by tourism companies that don't even, they're not even from Latin America, they're from England and the United States and places. So frequently, it doesn't actually benefit these countries that much. Look at how much debt Brazil went into to host the World Cup and how much debt they're accruing for putting on the Olympics. The hope is they're going to make that back, but there's no guarantee. So it's going to be something interesting to watch after the next Olympic Games to see how they sort of deal with that. Does anyone need any more time on this? Okay. I can give you a few seconds. Okay. If you need to get this, if you need to write all this stuff down, don't forget it is going to be on YouTube. It'll be tomorrow morning. Actually, you know what? No, it won't. I'll put it on today, so that way you guys can have access to it for tomorrow's quiz. But regardless, moving on. Okay, here we go. You guys can get the rest of it online. No big deal. Just follow the link through Edmodo and all will be well. One thing also is income inequality we see. This is a pretty nice hotel when you look at it. From this side, nice beaches, everything's cool. And one thing my parents said, yeah, whenever we were in Brazil, we didn't see any of the poor people, you hear about all the terrible poverty, we didn't see them. You know why? Because they built a fence around the hotels. If you're poor, you're not allowed near the hotels. This is the favelas, the places where you have some of the most poor people in the world living. Essentially ramshackle huts put together with whatever they could find. And it's right next to these nice hotels. But they built this fence so that no one sees it. They have like a barrier so that it's out of sight, out of mind. In some cases, like in the Philippines, not Latin America per se, but it's kind of the same sort of story. When the Pope showed up, they they basically imprisoned all the homeless people so that you wouldn't see it. This is the kind of thing that they do. And it's very sad, but we can also maybe understand where they're coming from, because let's face it, if you have a bunch of poor people hanging around basically busking and begging from tourists, are the tourists going to want to go there? So that hurts everybody. So it's kind of a necessary evil to some extent. Okay, let's move on to the next section, why don't we? So we're going to start on region. Did I just open the same one twice? I'll go here. Here we are. All right, so region. Looking at culture, things like that. So one of the things we're going to see is that there are 4 or 5 distinct regions in South America and Latin America. For instance, you'll see this map has it as South America as one. However, I would point out that there's a distinctly difference in between Brazil and the rest of South America. What's the number 1 language spoken in Brazil? Portuguese, yeah. Do you guys know why? Well, they didn't find it, they conquered it, but I see what you're saying, yes. They discovered it, if you will. Whereas the rest of it was conquered by who? Spain, sure. So why all this happened? What went on down there? Well, basically, when Columbus discovers the New World, he does so for Spain. He was actually Italian. The reason he didn't go with Italy is Italy already had trade routes established with China. They had that overland through the Ottoman Empire. They controlled a lot of the wealth. So whenever he proposed to the various Italian kings, hey, I have this idea, they weren't interested. So then he went to Portugal. Well, Portugal had discovered a way through the voyages of Vasco da Gama and Henry the Navigator and several others that there was a trader, if you went around the southern tip of Africa, around the Cape of Good Hope, you could get to India that way. So they basically went around the other side, and they didn't need another trader, so they said no thanks. Spain, on the other hand, had no real trade routes to the New World, or excuse me, to China and to the spice trade, and they had actually undergone a civil war essentially. And really, that's kind of it wasn't a civil war. No, that's not right. Rather, it was a crusade to retake the southern part of Spain from Muslims, the Reconquista. And so they were kind of looking for something like that. So they ended up backing Columbus's voyage. So whenever he finds the New World, he claims it all for Spain. Well, Portugal feels very threatened by this. So they end up threatening a world war with Spain over the New World. Basically said, no, that's Portuguese. And so basically this war is about to break out. So Pope Alexander VI comes in and says, guys, let's chill out. Let's make an agreement here. And organized a peace treaty called the Treaty of Tordesillas. He drew the line of demarcation, and then actually moved a year later at the Treaty of Tordesillas, which separated South America between what would be conquered by the Portuguese, which is Brazil, and what would be conquered by the Spanish, which is basically the rest of South America. They gave Spain the bigger chunk because, well, they found it, so it's only fair. And they basically kept them from fighting a civil war. Wasn't that nice? Keeping peace and everything like that? Of course, if you're a Native American, you wouldn't think so. Speaking of history of this region, the history of South America, as well as, frankly, Central America, is in many ways still being discovered. There wasn't a lot preserved during the Spanish era. In fact, the Spanish did everything in their power to erase any indigenous culture. They forced the people to speak Spanish. If you spoke the indigenous language, you could be whipped. They forced them to dress like Spanish, learn the faith of the Spanish. Like everything that was their culture was completely erased. And so the elements that kind of stayed behind are kind of hidden and changed. The history before all this, we're still trying to figure it out. We do know there are 3 main empires in this area of the world: the Maya, the Inca, and the Aztec. The Aztec were in the north around the area of Mexico and down in through the Yucatan Peninsula. The Maya were farther south than that, around sort of the Isthmus of Panama and up north of that. The Inca were predominantly in western South America along the Andes, specifically in the area of modern-day Peru. In fact, the capital of the Inca, Cusco, is the capital of Peru today. You know, like Hail Cusco, Emperor's New Groove? Okay. Interestingly enough, the Aztec. Aztec and Inca are both actually don't mean what we think they mean. For instance, the Inca actually means leader. Allegedly, what happened was when Francisco Pizarro and his conquistadors came to Peru, they basically were trying to figure out, who are you people? What tribe are you? What do you call yourselves? They kept saying Inca. So they're like, okay, you're the Inca. Well, they weren't saying we're the Inca. They were saying go talk to the leader. Go talk to the king. So apparently that was a screw up. The Aztec, not real sure where that came from. However, I can tell you this: the Aztec did not call themselves the Aztec. They refer to themselves as Mexica, the Mexica, which the sounds in European is often translated, the sh sound is translated as an X. Mexica. Think about it. Mexico. Sure. Mexico. That's what they call themselves. And one of the things I think we sometimes fail to remember is that these were vast empires. There's a lot of barbarism that we tend to overinflate about not only the Aztecs, but all the indigenous peoples of South America, and indeed North America. For instance, you guys are probably somewhat familiar with the Aztec religion. In particular, its practice of human sacrifice. We'll get to that here in a second. But sufficing it to say, that's not all of their culture. It would be insulting to say otherwise. Let's talk about mathematics for a second. They were heavily advanced in terms of math compared to many other civilizations. One thing that I know for a fact they knew about was the concept of zero, which doesn't seem like that big a deal. But think about how much complex math relies on the concept of nothing, being able to represent that. Most math forms or words basically revolve around the concept of, well, it's whatever you have. The whole idea of zero or negative numbers that matter was a form. In terms of astronomy, they had one of the most accurate calendars ever created. In terms of architecture, a lot of their buildings were set up to take advantage of whatever was around them. A great example of this is the capital city of the Aztec, Tenochtitlan, which, by the way, Cortez totally destroyed and replaced with his own capital city, Mexico City. But what do you notice about this city? It's very organized, yes. This is an estimated what it looked like. We don't actually know because Cortez destroyed it. But one thing we do know is that it was a floating city. It was on a lake. They took advantage of the water because one of the things you realize very quickly about farming around the Yucatan is that it's really, really difficult to irrigate your crops. Either there's way too much water or not enough. It's really hard to predict what's what. In fact, their religion was expressly organized around the need for water and the need for knowing what's going to go down. They used the basic predecessor, or basically a predecessor of hydroponic farming. They grew their crops in soil that they drug from the bottom of the lake, which was very rich in nutrients. They put it in baskets and farmed, and that had constant irrigation through the water in the lake. And it was brilliant, But most people, when they think Aztec, tend to think something along the lines of this. Human sacrifice, blood and guts everywhere, Let's talk about their faith for just a brief few minutes. So first off, they were a polytheistic faith. What does that mean? Right. And polytheistic with a mystic tradition. Mysticism in religion basically means being able to experience God and the supernatural in our current lives. A lot of religions basically preach that you can't really experience God until you die. Mysticism says that's not true. The way you go about experiencing God varies from place to place. But ultimately, blood was incredibly symbolic in the Aztec faith. Now let's look at something else here, the concept of human sacrifice. On the outward, on the outward side of things, that basically seems like it means you have to kill somebody. It's a religious right to kill somebody. And certainly that is an aspect of human sacrifice. But technically, human sacrifice is giving something up that is human, specifically blood. Blood was seen as very important. Killing someone like this really didn't happen that often. If you read historical accounts, Cortez and other conquistadors were like, no, that was happening all the time. Like, they were killing like 1,500 dudes a night. Which, just think about that logically for a second. 1,500 people sacrificed ritually in one night. There's only so many hours a night, you know? I mean, seriously, I don't know anyone, like, I don't know a dude who eat 1,500 hot wings in one night, you know? Just not enough time in the nights, not to mention belly size. It's unlikely that that was true. It actually makes sense from Cortez's character why he would lie about it. You know, he was trying to conquer a people. He didn't want sympathy back home in Spain for these people. I mean, think about it this way. Because a lot of his letters also talk about being in awe of Tenochtitlan, talking really great about their civilization. What if he's like, yeah, it's great civilization, these people are super nice, we should kill them all and steal their things? Psycho. You know, as opposed to these poor heathens, you know, their kings are sacrificing, they're sacrificing so many, we need to save them from themselves. Sounds a lot better, doesn't it? So odds are good, it was exaggerated. It still happened, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it didn't. We know de facto it did. We have mummies with their skulls crushed in, and they killed children. Men, women, children, didn't matter, all were sacrificed. But we have to understand that we can't fall for the fallacy of trying to compare their culture to ours. It's just not, it doesn't work, it does not compute. You can't even compare our culture to our culture 100 years ago. Not really being fair about it, you know. So it's trying to avoid that. Let's look at the realities of it. Why human sacrifice? Well, blood is often associated with water. It's actually symbolic of water, the water of life, you would say. You guys know this with Christianity, the blood of Christ, being a big deal. However, they take it one step farther, and that is specifically the spilling of blood to guarantee water. Now, generally speaking, this actually didn't have to be that much blood. And generally, the recipients of sacrifice were the priests themselves. They would take quill needles and things like that and prick their finger and burn blood that was smeared on paper in order for it to rise up in smoke and sacrifice, that sort of thing. Basically, how much water you needed, how desperate you were, if you're going to war, things like that, you would sacrifice more blood. In fact, war was the number one way of spilling blood for the blood god, so to speak. Anybody catches that reference? Well, no. Anyways, so the thing is that this was used as a bit of propaganda by the conquistadors, because remember, they were looking for gold, but they also wanted to do what? What else do they want to do? Spread Christianity. They're all about gold and God. That's the two G's, remember that. What is this? It's a calendar, yeah. It's the Aztec calendar. Real quick on this is a slightly better picture of it, I think. It works like this. The outermost portion are days, right here. Then we go to months, and then we go to years. So we start here, and we go through our days, and we change to a new month, and so on and so forth. Something to that way, basically like a clock. So you guys are probably familiar with the whole 2012, the world's going to end, the Aztecs said so. Okay, you know where that misinterpretation came from? Because they're like, this is where the year ends. Except what happens? Stars like every year. Seriously, that's why people were all like, oh my God, world's going to end. I had people in class that were swearing to me that was when the world was going to end.
That was my brother's 21st birthday, so everyone was like, make sure you drink a lot before the world ends.
Oh, my. So yeah, two conquistadors need Cortez and Pizarro. Cortez is the guy who conquers the Aztec. Pizarro conquers the Inca. Okay? Their objectives, gold and God. They wanted gold, and they wanted to spread Christianity. Now again, the whole story of conquest is kind of fascinating. Let's start with Pizarro, because he's kind of quick and easy. Pizarro came to the area basically after Cortez, trying to seek to conquer some stuff for his own. And when he got there, he encountered these peoples who had just fought a civil war. The emperor of the Inca was named Atahualpa. Atahualpa had secured his throne from his brother, but was fairly weak because of it. So what happened is Pizarro and his men kidnapped Atahualpa and ransomed him. Basically told the Inca, if you do not pay us a ton of money, specifically gold, we are going to kill your emperor. Well, guess what? The Inca paid them, but then the Spanish killed him anyways and then proceeded to destroy everything. Good guys there. Easy peasy. Cortez's story is a little bit more interesting. You see, when he landed, he encountered several different peoples, and he was asking who's in charge, who's the power. They kept saying the Mexica, the Mexica. He was like, okay. And in specific, he found a woman by the name of Malinche who was able to quickly figure out the Spanish language and could act as an interpreter. So she ended up guiding them to the Aztec. And what's fascinating about that is the Aztec Empire wasn't actually all Aztec. The Aztec were the elite class. Everybody else was subjugated peoples. So her people were subjugated by the Aztec. So she's thinking, aha, here's all these guys, they want to kind of go get stuff. If I can sort of aim them and get them to fight against the Aztecs, my people can maybe break free in a revolution and all will be great. So this is why she was helping them. It didn't happen that way. That's the idea. So the Spanish end up going to the capital city, Tenochtitlan, and while there they meet the Emperor Montezuma. Now, here's the thing about Montezuma. You guys have probably heard this legend that there was a story that Cortez was treated like a god. That they came in and, oh my gosh, he's a god. Well, that's kind of true. Some people were enamored with him. Some people thought he was a god. But the problem is that he didn't speak Aztec. So how would that be a god? You know what I mean? The problem is, the thing that kind of confused people is there was an Aztec legend that there was going to be a pale-faced foreigner who arrived upon a beast of another world. Well, he was pale, obviously, and he was foreign, obviously. What was the beast of another world? A horse. There were no horses in South America. So this is kind of like, it's like a really, really big guanaco. You know, so they were kind of curious about it. So Montezuma let him in, but pretty quickly figured out that he wasn't a god. They actually attacked Cortez and his men. They had to fight their way out of the city. So it wasn't like they were like, oh, he's a god, we're going to keep giving him money, we're dumb. No, they knew something was up, but they were curious and wanted to find out. Montezuma was actually killed by his own people for being an utter failure, essentially. Now, this begs a question, though. How, in goodness gracious' name, were the Spanish able to conquer civilizations that were way bigger than them? I mean, we're talking, Cortez had like 196 dudes. He's going to fight against hundreds of thousands? How does that work? It's actually a combination of things. Obviously, they had guns. Guns played a big role. In fact, there's really three roles that we tend to look at: guns, germs, and steel. Are kind of the reasons why they were able to defeat them. Guns, obviously. Steel. You know, the fact that they had steel armor that could repel the stone weapons of the Aztec. Which, by the way, when we say stone weapons, we're actually talking about something more elaborate than bash facing and rock. They used obsidian, which is an incredibly sharp volcanic glass. In fact, there was a type of weapon they had that was, I believe, called the Maquitza, which is essentially like a stone and wooden chainsaw. It didn't have any moving parts. It was actually like a club that had these bits of these obsidian put into it, but it was strong enough that it could decapitate a horse. So I mean, we're talking a pretty brutal weapons here. However, against armor, not so much. The big thing though is germs. Smallpox devastates the Native Americans. They had no resistance to this disease. So it ended up killing, in some cases, entire tribes. It was devastating. But all these things also added up together to cause fear. Now, if you think about it, these guys are able to kill you without them ever even meeting the transmission of germs. They don't know it's germs. In fact, the Native peoples thought this was the gods cursing them. They thought this was the end of the world. Add on to this fact that these guns are loud, noisy, scary things. I mean, if you've never heard a gun go off, it goes off, it's like, oh my gosh, because it rattles your teeth. It's so loud. And then someone dies over there. It's magic, or a dragon. Have all had no dragons, you know, it'd be terrifying. So these are all things that kind of added together and compounded to basically make the natives give up. You know, they couldn't fight that. The times they did, it was terrible, you know. So all these things compounded. Let me double check this next slide. Oh yeah, the Treaty of Tordesillas, you guys should know that as well. Religion, yeah, I'm not going to do that one. Yes, you have a quiz tomorrow.
What is the religion?
Everything we've covered so far this week.
Even today?
Yes.
What's your YouTube?
You go on Edmodo, just follow the folder that says YouTube and click on it. It's the easiest way of finding it. Alright, so you'll need 3 to sort of see us and everything else. I'm not going to go on to religion, even though, for anyone first grade is watching this, first grade we got farther, obviously we didn't play trivia crap. So we got all the way to the religions things, talking about that. I'm not worried about that for you guys. This is enough. So
Religion will not be on our quiz.
yeah, I won't be talking about the religions.
And then for the vocab, was that in a book or something? Do we
Yeah.
have vocab on it?
Yeah. It all should be in your book. However, it doesn't follow any specific page order. This is just how I wanted to do it. I did it by theme and geography. Your book handles it by its own way. So that's why I don't tend to link
Like
it
a
up.
chapter?
Yeah. Basically, my best recommendation is this. Look through your notes, and if you see something with a proper name, you need to know.
Okay.
That's the best way, because that's how I usually ask questions. I'm going through the slides and going, oh, that'd be a good question. Like, for instance, I'm asking you, give me, I mentioned 3 different ways that the native peoples were defeated by the Europeans. Give me 2 of 3. What would you say? Guns and Germans would be fantastic. Okay? Okay, good. Good job today, guys. We actually had a good clip. We had to do 2 extra slides in the previous session. The first period didn't. Plus, we played trivia class, and we only were 1 slide away from the first period. So, good job. Because someone had